Hey there, man. Mike Yarbrough here. Welcome back to another Truck Talk Thursday episode on the Wolf and Iron podcast. If you're new, if you're just checking out Wolf and Iron for the first time, let me just say welcome to you. I'm glad you're here. I believe you're going to be experiencing something unique. Maybe me calling out the roadkill that I see on the side of the road as I'm driving or what have you. But if not that, you're going to experience something where I'm speaking as I believe a man ought to speak about being a man. And that is unique in today's society. These Truck Talk episodes are really just a way for me to just engage with you guys and just on my route to work and back, just to have a sort of an off-the-cuff conversation with you guys. Whatever's on my heart, whatever's on my mind, and I think these things can be valuable. And today I'm going to be talking about toxic masculinity, sort of. You see, there's implications here. You know, I don't really believe there's a thing called toxic masculinity. It could be argued that there is kind of a certain kind of way that vices are portrayed that are more masculine. A man portrays his vices in a way, and so therefore it's like toxic maleness, right? But of course there would have to also be a toxic femininity. We don't really hear about this. We just say a woman's just being a rude person or the B word or something like that. Right, and typically we would have just said a guy's just being a jerk. And women can be jerks and guys can be, all kinds of things as well. So I don't think we necessarily can solve this issue of whether toxic masculinity is a real thing or isn't a real thing. It's certainly not a thing in terms of the way that it's portrayed today, that simply men being men is toxic in some kind of way, or maleness is, by default toxic. And that's certainly not the case. So in that case, no, there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. So I'm not trying to judge that right now. That's a topic for probably a longer sit-down podcast. What I want to talk about is this, and this is the thing people aren't talking about, but it's the most obvious conclusion. If toxic masculinity exists, if it's a thing, then what are we calling men to be instead? Wouldn't we simply be calling them to be masculine? Like, isn't that before you become toxic, you're just simply masculine? And to say that there is something called toxic masculinity is to also say that there is something that's simply called masculinity. What does that look like? Why are we not talking about that as a culture? What does it mean just to be a man without all the toxic parts? And you see, I think that's a really great place. I don't know if any of you guys have the opportunity to have these kind of debates about these things. I so wish someday I can get on like Fox News or CNN or something like that and talk to somebody about these kinds of things. Get interviewed, be on a little panel discussion, because this is kind of basic to me. If there's a thing called toxic masculinity, there must be a thing called masculinity. And if there's a thing called masculinity, there might be a thing called femininity. And let's define what these are. So that way, at least people have some parameters as to how they ought to be, how they ought to behave. And I bet that if many of the progressives were to try and define what it meant to be masculine, one, they would get all tied up in knots trying to do it without emphasizing anything that is particularly male. And also anything that was, if they were trying to describe femininity, probably have the same issues. Nothing specifically feminine, that women can't do, certain things that men can't do, or, whatever. No. I think it would be fun to see them try it. But what does it mean to be masculine? Well, it's simply the virtues that a human being can have presented in masculine form. That's masculinity. Now, can we define that, what that looks like? No, not necessarily, but we can show people, right? Try to explain to someone who has never seen a man as he's supposed to live, and try to explain to them why it's a valuable thing. Or a woman, right? A woman as she ought to be, and try to explain to them how precious that is, and how wonderful that is, and how complementary it is to manhood. And they really can't get it, right? I mean, you can't get that point across, but you can show it to them. And the great challenge that we have before us today, guys, is that we're trying to explain what masculinity is to a culture that, by and large, hasn't seen it for a very long time and doesn't see it when they turn on the TV or they're on social media or what have you. They see pretty much toxic everything and neither masculinity or femininity on display. We're far more interested in the vices today than we are the virtues. Apparently virtues don't sell like they used to. So that's really it. It's kind of a short one today, guys. The point here is I want you guys to think about that. The next time you hear the term toxic masculinity or somebody questioning, maleness, ask them this. If there's a toxic masculinity, then doesn't that mean that there's just a plain old masculinity? And what do you think that looks like? And see what the reaction is. All right, guys, that's all I got. Hey, look, if you want to find out more about what Wolf and Iron has going on, if you want to be a part of a discussion about these kinds of things, a great place to do that is over at our free Facebook group. You can get there by going to wolfandiron.com/thegroup. That'll take you over to the sign-up page for our Facebook group. And just fantastic men over there having these kinds of discussions. And, throw this one out there, right? What does it mean to be masculine? What is toxic masculinity? And you'll be really surprised at the quality of responses that you get. All right, fellas, I look forward to talking to you guys next Thursday. Take care.